Welcome to my channel and thank you for clicking on this video. This month of March has been exactly what we thought it would be. It has been trap after trap after trap after trap after trap, and after we have to see what is going to happen tomorrow because we may very well be getting our next trap, and that's why it's very useful to get these daily ranges for the SPY and Qs that we're going to give you today as we get into some technical analysis for the SPY, Qs, Apple, Tesla, Amazon, NVDA, AMD, and we're going to take a look at Meta as well. Let's get right into it because we have PPI coming out tomorrow. Because we do get PPI tomorrow, I thought it would be a good time to look at the sentiment of the overall market. And so I have pulled up here CPC before we go into the SPY just to show you guys that we have a current reading of 1.16 put to call ratio. This CPC is actually taking into account all of those stocks in the US exchange. Okay, so all the stocks that are being on the US exchange, it's actually measuring the puts and calls that are in each of those individual stocks and the indices and giving you guys that overall ratio. So going into tomorrow, we can see that bearish sentiment coming in on the CPC, and that is something to note as we move into a big event like PPI. It looks like a lot of people are positioned for some kind of drop. Now, me, myself, I would like to use that as maybe a contrarian indicator. Maybe we're actually going to see higher prices in a lot of stocks and a lot of these indices because we are not losing any main things at this point. We have this red bar here, but it's still above the 5-day moving average, so nothing to be too scared about there. As we go into a 2-hour, sorry, my camera kind of turned off for a sec, but as we go into a 2-hour here, we're going to tell you guys those daily expected moves for the SPY, okay? So we do have 520.49 to the upside here, and then we also have 513.57 to the downside. So these are going to be what we expect for the day, and going into the Qs is going to be very interesting because we ended the day right at where we expected to be by end of day. So that's very interesting. But on the SPY here, what I wanted to point out on the 2-hour was we do have these divergences up here on the MACD, really just starts here on the RSI. So you have that triple divergence down here right now on the RSI. Hasn't confirmed yet, but if we get that to confirm, I can see where the bearishness is coming from. I can see how there is weakness up here in the momentum. So we can see this roll over and go into negative territory. But that is the important part. We are still in a positive trend. I want you to remember that. This is still a positive trend. I still showed you the daily chart, which is telling you we're still above the 5-day moving average. So there isn't really weakness showing up in the price of the S&P 500 right now. So we have to pay attention to that. And the way that you can look at this is if this rolls over and gets into negative territory, that's really going to be decided by the PPI. So make sure we're still trading like water out there. Make sure we're being ready to flip and go with the stream, whichever direction it decides to go tomorrow based on that news. Because we've seen when this news comes out that whatever the reading is, we had a hot CPI again, which tells us that most likely we are not going to see rate cuts for at least in the recent time frame, and we actually could be seeing those later on. The 2-hour, you notice that there is the possibility of that momentum shifting to the downside, but it really just depends on that PPI. So we have to look at a little shorter time frame. Let's look into this 30-minute here and see if we see anything bearish as far as the SPY goes. And right now you're just seeing, hey, yeah, you have this divergence, or not really a divergence because you didn't exceed this high, okay? So we do have somewhat of a lower high possibly forming with some kind of small double top. We look like that full measured move has already played out. This really could go either way based on that news, and that's why we're trading like water. But really pay attention if this MACD is able to actually get into and remain in negative territory. If we get some kind of sudden drop down into our daily expected move early on in the day, we saw how that played out. We dipped down into it and we kind of just hovered at it the rest of the day for the Qs. So that's something we're going to look at. But I want to make sure you know that this here is still in positive territory on the 30-minute. If this rolls up, we can come beat this high. We can beat this high. Most likely you'd want to go in order, right? We want to test this high, then we can test this high, and maybe we even want to go to the top side of our daily expected move, which sits right by our weekly expected move. So this area up here, we told you guys yesterday, maybe this area is going to be very, very important going forward, and that's something we have to pay attention to going into tomorrow because we have a lot of bearish sentiment, and if you're a contrarian, you might say, hey, the PPI might go the wrong way on these people. We actually might see another new all-time high in the SPY. Now, that's not to say we have to get new all-time highs in the SPY, though. It really depends on that PPI because we do have these divergences on the Qs here, on the MACD, on the RSI at the same time, and that has officially rolled over, but we're still very tight on this RSI. So I think an explosive move is coming in the next few days. Is that going to explode up first and then trick people in another trap to come back down. Well, one thing about the Qs that's a little bit weaker than the SPY is it did lose that 5-day moving average just a little bit, but it's hovering right at it at this point. So if you wanted to see more positivity, you're really going to want to see a bounce from that level. As we switch over to a 2-hour real quick, we can see there was some divergence for a double top up here. Okay, we have that divergence for a double top, and we were talking about maybe some positivity for a triple top or even exceeding that, going up a little bit higher, creating another point of divergence for this high up here. To give you kind of two divergences there to really convince you, hey, there is some major weakness here. If we get some bad news, it can be bad for the market. So we want to pay attention to the daily range for tomorrow because it's a big piece of news. 445.66 to the upside, and we have 434.80 to the downside. Okay, so these are the areas that we're going to be paying attention to on our stock market live show. So please join us back in the morning if you want to watch this stuff with me live. Okay, now this is funny because you have this divergence up here. You are right next to negative territory, but look at that. We are barely in positive territory at this point. So this still is a 50-50 flip going into tomorrow. If that PPI reaction is good for the market, we can turn up in positive territory, kind of get rid of some of these divergences. Maybe we create that second one up here, but we can see that positivity come in. So just like the SPY, let's go a little bit deeper into the Qs with a shorter time frame. Well, this would have to say, hey, this looks bullish, right? We have some consolidation up here. We can see that move a little bit higher with some kind of A, B, C pattern, right? And we would end up maybe at the top side of our daily expected move. The thing I wanted to mention about the MACD that's a little different here is this might be the slightest tick for maybe a 1% up tick for the bears here. You're barely into negative territory, but I would just say you're right at that center line. I wouldn't read too much into that. I would just say, hey, I'm right at this center line. This really does have the potential as of tomorrow to either go down pretty quick into negative territory or up into positive. So you really do have a 50-50 shot, and the 30 minutes telling you it's 50-50 because it's right in the middle of that center line. And so we could see that positive trend continue if we start to creep that back up, able to roll over. But if the PPI comes out bad for the market, the reaction is bad for the market, we can see that roll into negative pretty quick. So we want to pay attention to those types of things. I just want to pay attention if it does see some downside, maybe we get some kind of divergence down here to really tell us, hey, there is going to be some kind of bounce, but most likely as you are going into negative territory, you want to see if that's sustained and going to keep going over time. We do have some big news coming out next week, but I just wanted to say it one more time. Tomorrow, you can see it right here. This 30-minute is telling you it's a 50-50 flip. We need to trade like water and react based on that rock that's in the middle of our stream. And it looks like that rock is going to be the PPI tomorrow. And then we just want to figure out which way it's flowing and go with the flow. Apple on the daily, this is not really looking good, right? We popped above that 5-day moving average for a little bit, but then we see that kind of ripped away pretty quick. We're closing below it just barely at this point. Now, that doesn't mean we can't get some kind of reaction here. So I wanted to just go through these, show you guys one of the other bearish things I'm noticing is this 2-hour, possibly getting some flagging here to go a little bit lower. But we kind of called this rotation last Friday into Apple. And so maybe people do actually come out of Apple and rotate back into NVIDIA with some positive news, but we see Apple actually head to lower levels. So what I'm going to look for in the near future, if we do see downside for Apple tomorrow, is some kind of 2-hour divergence to get a more meaningful bounce. Now, this does still have the opportunity to turn back up. So because we were in positive territory and then we see this drop off a little bit, we are completing some cups and handles and things like that right now. So the downside's looking pretty good right now because you are actually in negative territory, but you're still pretty close to that center line. So if we do get some good news, we can see another push higher. Maybe Apple does want to head to this top side here, head to that zone that we've been talking about where we sold off from last time. So pay attention to any upside because if this curls up, you can go up, but pay attention to that 2-hour because the 2-hour looks a little bit more bearish as it is further down in negative territory. Amazon, I wanted to talk about the 2-hour. Possibly, if we get some good news, we could set up a point of divergence going into tomorrow. We were talking about this being some, wider bull flag at this point. So we could see that break to the upside. And Amazon was very, very strong today, which is interesting because we saw some weakness throughout the day. Let's be real here. Now, the thing that's cool about this is you saw it curl up into positive territory. You see how when we get that vertical curl up right here, we're seeing that positivity come in as we get into positive. It's still in positive territory. So be paying attention to the 2-hour. If it wants to roll over, we could be starting a negative trend coming down like this. But if we do see it dip down a little bit in the morning and curl back up, we can see this head and shoulders on the way up. So we have to see, is this going to be a head and shoulders up, or are we getting a more complex head and shoulders on the way down, right? We can see this liquidity has been built up in here for quite some time. So the reaction from tomorrow could be really bad or really good. And that's why we want to wait till we actually see that data, but not only see the data, see how the market reacts to it. As of right now, Amazon in a positive trend on the 2-hour is a good sign for more positivity. But as I go into a 30-minute, you're going to see we are curling over on this 30-minute. So we could have a period of consolidation before heading higher, maybe a rotation out of Amazon because it did see some strength. But if this wanted to dip a little bit lower for a few minutes, that would make sense. Go grab some liquidity in here. It would make a lot of sense going forward. The thing about this is you're still in positive territory. So if this does roll down and roll back up, most likely you are going to see another push higher and come and test this high up here or go make a new one for Amazon. Now, Tesla has a good lesson in it. We've been pointing out these divergences for quite some time, and we're going to talk about Bollinger Bands here in a second, but we've been talking about this daily divergence that's been forming, and that's the key word here. It is forming, it is not confirmed. There is still plenty of room to make a divergence way down here, so it could come all the way down to 154.76 before seeing that meaningful turnaround, getting that divergence to actually confirm. So we want to look at the shorter time frames. Wanted to talk about the Bollinger Bands here real quick. We were stating around this bar right here, right on Tuesday, March 5th, we were stating how a lot of the time when you test that bottom Bollinger, you like to reconnect with the 5 in some way. That can be sideways price action, but you notice we went sideways and down and hovered right around our 180.92 to get those tests of the 5-day, and now we're seeing a confirmation of more downside. So could we see more downside in Tesla going forward? We definitely could. We just want to wait for this to actually confirm on the daily scale, but it's pretty cool to see it test the 5-day and then make that move down, kind of ride the 5-day down. Now, the 2-hour here is what I wanted to talk about. We could be creating some divergence as of right now, which is something to pay attention to going into PPI. We could be getting a good reaction before we actually get that when we get the PPI news to roll up that daily divergence. Okay, so this is a point where we want to pay attention. If we get good news tomorrow, you see the divergence here on the MACD forming, not confirmed on the MACD, and the RSI hasn't confirmed on the RSI either. You want that to start to point back up. Now, the thing about this is you do have this little divergence here. You have a big divergence across the way here. So we could be seeing a decent move out of Tesla if we get some good news tomorrow. Since we're looking at all the time frames, I'm going to show you guys the 30-minute for a second here. We were really just talking about all of this in here. Looks like you're stuck in some kind of range. Look for a break of that range. If you turn down in negative territory, it's going to mean bad things. We had a bunch of divergences and we're trying to confirm those, but you don't remain in positive territory. So you do have that divergence still here on the 30-minute. So we can still pay attention to this, but Tesla not looking the strongest. It's actually looking like probably the weakest stock that we do cover on this channel. Video real quick, talking about Bollinger Bands. We come outside of that Bollinger Band. What do? We want to go test this 5-day, sit around it for a little bit, and see if we can turn back up. Let me wait. It's okay. Wait. NVIDIA, pretty interesting on the daily that we get outside of that Bollinger Band, and what do? We gravitate towards that 5-day moving average, and when you come way outside of the Bollinger Bands, you see a bigger reaction, so it makes sense to drop a little bit below it. But you'll notice that we're kind of deciding, do we want to go up past it? Do we want to break down through it? Well, today, you saw it break down through it, but it's still remaining up above it, so this is not bearish at this moment. The signals are still bullish on this. There isn't any kind of confirming bar. This is an indecision bar. So we need that confirming bar, most likely below this one at this point, to really head lower. And if we go into a shorter time frame, like a 2-hour, you're going to see this a little bit better. Okay, so you're going to see a bullish and bearish case here. Mostly bullish, though, as we are in positive territory. Let me take a quick break. Baby girl's got colic. Hold on. Don't worry, guys, she's all good. Let's get into this 2-hour for NVIDIA here. We're looking at it here. There's a bullish and bearish case, but I can tell you right now, we just looked at that daily. We haven't lost any big moving averages. Sure, we could have slowing in momentum, but we need that to be bad news in order to really turn around. And you see how people are positioned. So you could be a contrarian based on that, but they could be right. So we want to react based on that data. Now on this, we were just looking at how this would actually start to break down. Well, we've been pointing out this little shoulder over here. We got the head, maybe we get a right shoulder over in this area. We have broken through the recent trend between these highs here. So I want to pay attention. If this 2-hour curls up, this would be very bullish. We could go make a new point. And this is an idea that we kind of mentioned in the last episode, last night's YouTube video. We were just mentioning, what if this is a left shoulder? We actually come up and make a head around above $1,000 price mark, since everyone wants that. And then we come get a right shoulder later on. Look at that structure that would be there on the way down. That would be very interesting. But if something actually does break up in this area, say a bank crisis or something like that, you might see this drop a little bit more dramatically. But I do believe that this would be a great structure to head down. And if this 2-hour curls up, it might be on the table. So pay attention to any upside, because this is still in positive territory. Remember that going into tomorrow when you're trading around PPI, this 2-hour is in positive territory, and that very well could curl up and give us some kind of point of divergence. It could give us no point of divergence and just keep going. Okay, so be very, very careful with NVIDIA going into a big event. And as we look into a 30-minute, just wanted to mention this one as well. We have a 30-minute, but it's not really in negative territory, right? We're still positive at this point. So if PPI does come out bad for the market, that could be the moment, but it is really a 50-50 flip. And I want to see what the market is reacting to that data, how it's reacting to that data, seeing if the 30-minute can go into negative territory and start that negative trend. If you get that negative trend to begin, you could come down to a point like this, get a small bounce, and then break through that level. So really pay attention to this base if we see negativity, if that's able to break through and then maybe retest and then break down again. That would really confirm, hey, we are definitely in a negative trend now. Now, AMD, it did come way outside of its Bollinger, okay? It came way outside of its Bollinger, and normally we do like to test the 5-day. We test that 5-day, we ended up losing that, and then going and testing the 20 at this point. So we're right at the 20, and we haven't lost that yet. So yes, this does look a little bit more bearish. We actually got the confirmation of this divergence crossing. So flatness on the MACD, a little bit downward on the RSI, so that is something to really pay attention to. AMD can be a little bit weaker than NVIDIA at this point from a momentum perspective. Now, we do get reactions to the 20 pretty often. You notice right here, we get that reaction, we come down to the 20. We get some buying up way back here, we get that reaction to the 20, right? We kind of just ride the 5 up and then we test the 20 and go higher. So this is just another test of the 20 at this point. Nothing to be totally scared out of anything as far as right now goes. So we want to do a little bit more assessment on this. Now, the other thing I wanted to point out on the 2-hour here, still right by positive territory. Now, this is negative, so you'd say, hey, it could be going into a negative trend if we start to head lower, but it could just curl back up with some good news, going and giving us some kind of divergence up here. Okay, so when we're looking for that divergence, if it doesn't come up and test all the way at this high up here, pay attention to these closing bars, because that's where the divergence is actually measured. Okay, so if this comes up like this, and we see price action actually go like this and not match that high, this is actually still divergence because it goes off of these closing bars. That's something to keep in mind, but you are right by that negative and positive territory. So even AMD, with how it's been selling a little bit here, is still on the 2-hour perspective, telling you this could really go either way tomorrow. The big thing that we posted on Patreon, okay? So we posted that there is a 30-minute divergence down here on the MACD, on the RSI for AMD right now. I just wanted to make everyone very clear about that, and you guys know how I like my 30-minute divergences. So even though this MACD down here is in negative territory, and we very well could continue to go negative, it is negative at this point. You see the flagging. We can continue down, but there's two things that are very, very good on Patreon and why you should join. You get those weekly ranges. We actually gave you the one for AMD. So if you are looking at AMD this week, this is a very, very good video to watch, because all the market has expected for AMD for the entire week is 191.26, and we are right down towards that level. We're about 3 to 4 points off of that level at this point. So we have to pay attention to this. This is why I put this on Patreon. The momentum to the downside is dying off. We're not seeing that selling come in. We're tapering off at this point. So we have to pay attention to AMD because it's giving us a divergence, and that divergence this likes to curl up the 2-hour a lot of the time with the 30-minute. So that would tell me if I get that positivity and I have that confirmation down here as of right now on that divergence, well, yeah, I'm still flagging and we could head lower, create another point for me to pay attention to, maybe even break outside of this weekly expected move down here. If this does happen, see if that is some good selling, violating a lot of these divergences, right? Coming below this one right here, or if that is just short-lived and we actually see that bought right back up, that can be good news. We actually can see a positive move from here because this is all the options market has expected, and 68% of the time we do land back above this line right here. Meta on the daily still in positive territory on this daily scale. We were mentioning some divergences up here, right, on the RSI, not necessarily on the MACD at this point, but what overall is Meta doing? Right now, it's just kind of coming outside of those Bollinger Bands, kind of like AMD, and guess what? When you do come well outside of them and wick out, you do get a bigger reaction, and that reaction took us all the way down to the 20. So we got that reaction from the 20, and now we're buying back up. This could just be some kind of pullback to head a little bit higher, maybe test these levels up here. So that's what I want to pay attention to. I gave you the monthly risk ranges for Meta, and that would be 528.40 to the upside and 451.86 to the downside. So we could be getting a big reaction up at this point as we are still in positive territory, maybe to give us an actual point of divergence on this MACD to get them at the same exact time. That would be very, very helpful, but I just wanted to say this is not the most bearish behavior. You have an indecision bar. You did get a retest of the 5, but we do have indecision with that. So this could go either way as of the daily side. Says it. The 2-hour, as we go into it, the thing I wanted to point out, look where it is, and this is why tomorrow really is a 50-50 flip. You can see it's consistent pretty much around a lot of these stocks, right in the middle, waiting for that data. If PPI is good for this, it can curl up, give us a point of divergence on the MACD and RSI again at the same time, right? But if it's bad news, we can roll into negative territory. So you're right in the center, which just tells me, hey, this might be a 50-50 flip as far as the 2-hour chart goes. So maybe I want to go into a 30-minute. Well, the 30-minute is telling me the same thing on Meta. The 30-minute is telling me, hey, this could roll over here. This could roll over, go into that negative trend and break through this low. So I want to pay attention to that, but it's also telling me, hey, I'm still slightly in positive territory. I really could go up also. So this is still 50-50 on a lot of charts as far as the stock of Meta goes, and that's what we want to pay attention to. How this would want to break down, really want to complete that cup and then get a small handle to head down. That would kind of solidify, hey, we got a head and shoulders in this overall move. You can see this base down here we said is very, very important, and that's why we want to pay attention to it. But as far as tomorrow goes, trading like water looks like the strategy. So join us live tomorrow morning for our stock market live show right at the market open. The VIX, we were talking about this 2-hour, wait for that thing to maybe get back up into positive territory. But for today, I really just wanted to tell you guys, you know, it's still closing on the daily below the 200, which is not a good sign if you're looking for some kind of crash. But the 30-minute is looking interesting. We're starting to see this MACD behavior where we start to creep up while the value of the VIX actually goes down. We're starting to head down, which means that we could come fill this gap down in here. We could come fill this one all the way down at a reading of about 13 before we see that. So I really want to look out for, as far as the tomorrow goes, I want to see if we can confirm some kind of divergence later on, or at least form one by end of day. We could get this to roll over and then come back up, and maybe this will be a hint that people are going to take profit going into Friday. We know a ton of people have options out there for AMD, NVDA, all these things, and we have that high put ratio, right? It's 1.16 going into tomorrow. So we could see things pile on and maybe people take profit if NVIDIA actually goes above 1,000. So that is what we want to pay attention to going on into tomorrow. But I really wanted you guys to see how this curving up of the MACD, we could see that curve back down. And if we're seeing divergences the other ways on stocks while we're seeing this divergence on the VIX, that could be a good sign that we're actually going to see volatility come back into this market as far as Friday goes. Now, that could just be a small pullback. And I really think that if we get good news with PPI tomorrow, we want to be paying attention to the Fed rate decision. I think a lot of people still have it in their head that they're going to cut rates like next month, and they keep saying end of year. I say this all the time with the Fed. They're pretty honest with how they talk about things. So they told you, we don't feel we're in full control of inflation, so we still need to follow the data. That means you have to follow the data. That's why PPI means so much right now. And then they also stopped from saying, hey, we're going to cut rates, early the first quarter of the potential to cut rates in the first quarter of 2024. That's off the table. Now they keep saying we're going to cut some by the end of the year. They're not giving 3, they're not giving 2, they're not even saying 1. They're saying we're going to cut some by the end of the year, which is not the best moving forward. It really doesn't give you any kind of inclination of when those cuts actually come. But when they do, I'm really thinking that something in the system is broken, and we're actually going to see some kind of crash when they actually cut those rates. So the main takeaway here is, because the Fed is not giving us really any cookies to go off of, we have to be very cautious around PPI and other readings, other data drops like this. And the thing is, we just looked at the charts, and a lot of them are telling you this is a 50-50 flip. Even the charts themselves on multiple timeframes are saying this is really a 50-50 flip. We are seeing some divergences form on things like Tesla, but that thing's looking like the weakest stock of all of them, so that's a little risky. But we're also seeing some bullish things that could happen if tomorrow's news is good. NVIDIA actually could get above 1,000 this week if we see that good news tomorrow, so that's something to pay attention to. But will that be ripped away with some kind of 30-minute divergence on the VIX by Friday? Thank you so much for watching. I know it's frustrating because tops take time, but we're in it together. We're trading back and forth like water. It's some of the best advice I could give, is to really be willing in a market like this, in a bunch of traps, bunch of March Madness traps. We have to be willing to flip and not get too bullish or too bearish. We know that this thing is going to crash down eventually, but it can take a lot of time, and we could see a lot of bumps in the road before that actually happens. So we have to be out there trading like water, moving around those rocks and finding which way the stream is going. I appreciate everyone who's showing up to the live video. Please think about joining my Patreon. And if you want to learn more about these things, such as, the indicators and how to read stocks, and maybe even a trading strategy for a bear market that I believe is coming by the end of the month, really go check down in the description. You can join my Patreon down in the description, and you can also take the course, which is going to be 50% off the entire month of March. At the end of March, we might be going into that bear market, so we're going to raise that price up just a little bit for you. Thank you guys so much for watching. Really, really do appreciate it. Really appreciate everyone showing up to the lives, liking, subscribing. You guys are fantastic, and that's why I hope that you guys have all the luck in the world trading tomorrow, and a fantastic night. Peace.